In this nugget, we are going to discuss and demonstrate how we can manipulate the options of waits as well as persistence as they relate to load balancing. Let's begin. We also have the option of telling the netscaler to be persistent. For example, if Bob logs in with the source IP address of dot whatever, every time that source IP address comes in, let's go ahead and always base it on that source IP address. Another scenario may be that we may have 3 servers and they're not all exactly the same as far as horsepower. Maybe one is twice or 3 times faster than the others. What we could do is we could also set up waits. So in these services, and currently we have a service for red, which is server 1, green, server 2, and blue, server 3, we could give them weighted values. By default, these services have a weight of 1. But if we wanted to do something like this, maybe give this guy a weight of 5, give blue a weight of 5, and give the green a weight of 3, then as the netscaler makes load balancing decisions, it would give more of the requests to the red and blue and less of the requests to green based on those weights. So as a couple of demonstrations, let's do this. Let's play with the weights of the 3 services that are currently in place, which represent HTTP services running on each of these servers respectively. And then after we configure and indeed verify that those weights are having an effect, and if we open up the details of that server and click right here where it says we have 3 service bindings, it'll show us right over here that the weight by default is 1. So equal weight for each of the 3 services. So from the user perspective, if we go back to Bob's machine for a moment, that should be equal load balancing across all 3. So there's red, and there's green, and I'm just going to throw it out there, I think the next one's going to be blue. And then it's just going to repeat that process because we have it set up for round robin. So back at the netscaler, let's go ahead and change the weights. So here are the default weights for each of them. So each of them have a default weight of 1. Let's go in and tweak it. Let's go ahead and give red a weight of 2, and we'll give blue a weight of 2, and we'll leave green at 1. And then as we do repeated requests to the virtual server, we should see most of the requests being answered by red and blue, and an occasional request being answered by green. So let's make those changes first. So we'll double click on red. And what we're doing is we're modifying the weight regarding this binding between the virtual server and this service. So we'll give red a 2 from the virtual server perspective. And we'll give blue a weighting of 2 as well. And we'll click on bind. So over here in the right hand column, we have the 2 and the 2 and the 1. So let's go test this out and verify to see if there is some bias towards red and blue, which there should be due to the weights that we've just set up. So let me go ahead and close this and click done there. And let's go back to There's 1 for green. So far, it's been an equal load balance across the 3 servers, but let's do a few more requests and see where the numbers take us. So that's blue, and that's red, and that's blue. Okay, that's a good sign, because what just happened is green has only been hit once, red's happened twice, and blue is 3 times. So let's do another request, and there's green. And let's go ahead and bring up another request. And it is blue again. Wow. So blue is at 4, red's at 2, and green's at 2. And I would be really happy if the next one to come up was red, because red is due. And the crowd goes mild. So that's 3 for red, 4 for blue, 2 for green, and we could continue this game for quite a while. But the reality is that the bias is going to be on red and blue because they have a larger weight than green. Next, let's set up persistence so that once the load balancing decision has been made and we have a connection, that we can do persistence based on things such as cookies. Now in our case, because we're loading Chrome with incognito mode, we're not keeping cookies between sessions. So that wouldn't work on our browser, but we could do persistence based on source IP. Of our virtual server. Currently, it's showing us that we have 3 services that are bound. That's the red, blue, and green HTTP services with the slightly different weights based on what we just changed a few moments ago. And the load balancing method is based on round robin. Now, if we're looking at this screen and we don't see the method section, it might be tucked over here. So we could click on a plus symbol, and that adds that to the left-hand side. For example, if we don't want to see the method here, we can click on the X, and that pops it back to the right-hand side. And if we wanted to bring it back over, we would click on the plus next to the method, and that brings it back over. It's also assuming, by the way, that we want to edit it. So it went ahead and expanded it for editing purposes as well. So here's our load balancing method. We have based on least connection, least response time, destination IP hash, source IP hash, and that's for the load balancing method. However, there's another option called persistence, where we can specify that we want to persist once the load balancing decision has been initially made. So we'll go ahead and close the method section. And to see the persistence, we'd go ahead and select it over here off the right-hand pane by clicking on the plus symbol next to persistence. That brings it over. And currently, the persistence is set at none, which means we're going to rely just on the load balancing method to determine which server happens to get Bob's HTTP request. But if we wanted to, we could use the drop-down arrow, and we could base the persistence on the source IP, or a cookie, or an SSL session. And there's other options as well. But let's choose source IP for this demonstration, and then we can specify a timeout. So let's give it a timeout of 5 minutes. So when Bob makes the connection, it's going to be directed to a specific server, and for the next 5 minutes, Bob's going to be sent to the same exact server. So with the source IP selected for persistence, and we have a timeout of 5 minutes, let's scroll down and click on OK. We'll click on Done, and let's go test this out. Demonstrated how we can tweak the load balancing, including the weights for the individual service, as well as options such as persistence that are parameters of our virtual servers and its related objects. I appreciate you joining me for this nugget. I had a lot of fun. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.